Alright legends, so I've been at work all day. It's late in the afternoon here in Melbourne. I've just got back from work. I haven't eaten all day, so I'm going to go get something to eat now. And then I'm meeting Alan, who's a nutritionalist. He works a lot with Stephen Lane on coaching athletes and getting their nutrition right. So we're going to chat with Alan and see what he has to say about nutrition for athletes. And I reckon this will be a really good insight for you guys. So anyway, I'm going to eat. You specialise in cyclists?
Mainly, yeah. Generally the endurance sports. So cycling, mountain biking, do work with a few 24-hour mountain bikers.
Right.
A few track guys occasionally as well. And then your other sort of endurance sports, triathlon, ultra running, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So track cyclists would be a much different diet to an endurance cyclist.
Not necessarily. I mean, their day-to-day diet may not be that much different. I mean, their goals may be a little bit different. Obviously, the training will possibly be quite different, particularly the sprint guys.
Yeah.
And therefore, sort of their nutritional needs are a bit different, and the quantities might be a little bit different. But the general makeup of what they're eating is not necessarily that different. It's just food, but it might just be in different quantities or different timing, that kind of thing, or slightly different emphasis and. Of what we're trying to do. So
Alan and I are going through what is on his computer very similar to MyFitnessPal or Chronometer, where you input your food and you sort of get your calories and etc. So we're just going through a typical day now of what I eat, and I'm trying to be as honest as possible. I'm telling him all about the Cokes and stuff that I eat as well, and the chips. And this will give us a rough idea of what I eat during a day. It doesn't have to be perfect, as Alan just said to me. He just said it. All we have to do is have it within 15% of reality, and we get a good idea of what you're eating. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do the criterium season, and towards the end of the criterium season, I want to be, say in March, I want to win a B grade crit.
Yep.
Dreaming. No, you got to have big aspirations.
Yeah, sure.
So we're talking about calories here. We're talking about calories in versus calories out, and we were just talking about, high calorie diets, high carbohydrate, low fat, low protein. And Alan's saying that just because you consume, say, 3,000 calories in a day, it doesn't necessarily mean your body extracts that 3,000 calories. You can poo it out, basically. So can you elaborate a little bit more on...
Sure. Yeah, so I mean, essentially the calorie value when you look at a nutrition label or you put something into MyFitnessPal, that kind of thing, those calorie values come from scientific sort of chemistry research in a lab where they take, pure fat or pure protein, pure carbohydrate, combust it in a little chamber and measure the heat energy that's released as part of that. And that's the calorie value that we get, what's known as the Atwater factors, which is basically 4 calories per gram of carbohydrate, 4 per gram of protein, and 9 per gram of fat.
Yeah.
So they're the theoretical values of the amount of energy that can be released from a gram of carbs, protein, fat, and that's the basis for all the calorie values that we see on labels and databases and all that kind of thing.
Is that right? Okay.
So the human body is a lot more complex than that, though. We don't just combust this thing in a chamber and measure the heat that's given off. That food has to be digested and absorbed across the wall of the gastrointestinal tract into our blood and travel around to the parts of the body where it will eventually be used to produce energy. And so some of that won't be fully absorbed out of the gastrointestinal tract. And so depending on what sort of diet you eat, some foods will be more completely absorbed than others. Now, we're not talking about, half your calories being pooed out the other end. It's not going to be that extreme. Yeah. But it will make somewhat of a difference. And particularly the school of thought is probably more processed foods. We're actually able to extract more of the energy from those compared to some unprocessed foods. And if you look at research around certain groups of foods, seem to have less effect on weight than the calorie value may predict they would have. So things like nuts, for example, don't seem to have the effect on gaining weight as you might expect from the calorie value of them, because they are very high in calories, mainly because of the natural oils, the fat content within the nuts. Dairy products is another one, and it's commonly thought that possibly the calcium actually stops some of the absorption of some of the fat from dairy products. So essentially it gets pooed out and we don't get it into the blood. And so again, we don't extract 100% of the theoretical calories that are in that food.
We have finished now. We've gone through my diet. We worked out I roughly eat the majority of my calories at night time. Probably 2/3 or a third.
Yeah, 2/3 from about 6 p.m. onwards.
Yeah, so I eat a lot at night, whereas during the day I'm so busy with work and other activities that I tend not to eat a lot, and I starve myself and then I eat the bulk at night. So we just went through a basic day, and we can work out that I'm roughly on 3,000 calories a day. Alan wants me to get that down to say 2,500 to 2,600, so a subtle change. A subtle reduction in my calorie intake, and I can easily do that at night. I know personally that I can easily do that at night. But we're going to go through a few little key points here and just wrap this up. Take it away.
Yeah, okay. So there's a few things that we looked at here. Obviously, being on a vegan or close to a vegan diet, there was a few particular nutrients that we were concerned about. Protein was one, and it's not to say you can't get protein on a vegan diet, but you certainly have to be more organised and plan better to do that. And so we've made a few plans in terms of including some of those regular plant-based sources of protein, your legumes and tofu and that kind of thing, more consistently, because they are in there, just not as consistently maybe as they could be.
Yeah.
And in the mornings actually using a protein powder, vegan protein powder, just from a convenience perspective. So we're not saying you have to use protein powder, we're just saying in your case that sort of fits with your routine and your lifestyle more easily. Yeah. So that's fine. Iron, your iron intake was actually pretty good, so there wasn't any sort of panic buttons there. And you get your iron tested from time to time and it's been normal, so we're not really too concerned about focusing on that. So that's fine. Calcium is one that we do get concerned about, particularly for cyclists, because there is a risk of poor bone density in cyclists because there's no weight bearing in the exercise. You actually lose some sweat through calcium, and also a lot of cyclists are focused on weight loss, and there is a risk, particularly with sort of really extreme and restrictive dieting, that put strain on your bones as well, or you tend to lose more bone density more quickly. So calcium was one of the things that was a bit low for you, so we're going to have some plans in place to try and increase that, using some things like the milk alternatives that are fortified with calcium, your rice and almond milk and that kind of thing. Adding that to your protein powder, for example, and at other times of the day to try and boost up the calcium a bit.
Okay.
And then vitamin B12 is a big one for vegans. Now you have a little bit of animal-based foods from time to time. And you get your B12 level checked every now and then. So again, it's not panic stations there. We'll just sort of see how that goes. Keep an eye on it every 6 months or so, and if it drops low, then worry about it then. And in some cases, supplementation is actually the easiest and best option, particularly for people who strictly follow a vegan diet.
Okay. All right. So, and then with the carbs, so you, in a nutshell, Alan's saying to me that he wants me to even out 20, so roughly 60 grams of protein a day, 20 per meal. As a minimum, and try to keep that fairly consistent throughout the day. But in terms of carbohydrate, he really wants me to focus on taking my carbs before big days on the bike. So, if I'm going to have a massive day on a Saturday, he wants me to sort of carb the hell up on a Friday afternoon. Okay.
And it's really about, I guess, looking at how many carbs you can afford to eat. Carbs make up probably half to 2/3 of most people's total calories. So if we're reducing the calories, by definition, probably some of that is going to have to come from carbs. So if we're going to be reducing the carbs somewhere, we have to be a bit smarter about how we use them around training. Okay.
Now, the final thing is you're going to go home, do a plan up for me now. And Alan wanted to emphasise that it's not going to be a really restrictive sort of rigid plan. Like we've got imperfect lives, I'm busy, I forget things, I'm focused on other things, I forget to eat, and then I eat too much later. It's just going to be fairly casual, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, this process of trying to work out how many calories you eat, whether you use like MyFitnessPal, a consumer app, or a professional package like this, we know that it's not perfect, and you're not going to get within more than about 10% of the truth. And even just estimating sizes and things is not perfect. So this is not perfect, therefore the plan by definition won't be perfect, and everyone responds a bit differently to the plan that you give anyway. So it's really about having something to work towards, some guidelines, but nothing that has to be so strict that you lose the enjoyment of eating and it becomes a real chore, because that's not going to work in the long run anyway. And then, you know, keep an eye on where you're tracking towards your goal and modify things as you need to.
Okay. All right. And are you going to keep in touch with me regularly, or what are we going to do?
Yeah, so normally I tend to follow up with people after about 2 or 3 weeks. That usually gives people long enough to see what effect changes they've made have had.
Yeah.
But not too long if the wheels have fallen off the wagon completely. You don't get back on track, so to speak. Okay. And then from there, it's just playing it by ear.
And do you want me to log my food in MyFitnessPal or Chronometer, or it's not relevant?
You can do. Some people find that a useful strategy, and it sort of makes them more aware of what they're eating, or keeps them, gives themselves some self-accountability for that. I don't think it's necessary for everyone to do that. And some people really hate doing it, so in that case, don't worry about it. If you've got a plan and you know you're roughly following those, what's in there, and you're tracking towards your goal, I don't think there's any need to do it. But for some people, they really struggle to follow the plan, or things aren't going to plan, and they use that as a tool to try and work out where things are going wrong, and it can be a useful tool for that.
All right, guys, so this is a diet, and food intake is a very controversial subject, and people are very passionate about it. I would ask that you be polite and ask if you've got any genuine questions. Feel free to ask Alan in the comments below.
And I think the main thing on that, I guess the way I would work with people is to start with what they're doing now, what their values and beliefs around food is. I'm not here to judge people. I'm not here to enforce a particular way of eating that I believe in, or that someone else does, or that a textbook does. I tend to work with people. If someone's on a vegan diet, I don't try and persuade them to get off a vegan diet. I work with that and try and make sure that if they're on track to meet their goals with that diet, well, that's great. You don't need to change anything. And my job, I guess, is to assist people if they're not meeting their goals, to help them within the parameters of what they're happy to do to try and achieve that goal. And as long as we're not putting someone's health in danger. And then the final thing I'd say along that point of view is, it's not my role to judge people, and that's one of my personal bugbears in nutrition is, people often getting on a high horse about something, and I'm not judging someone on how they eat, and that bugs me sometimes when other people judging other people on how they eat as well. Yeah.
So I'll just remind you that Alan is a professional in dietitian. He's a sports accredited sports dietitian, and he's commenced his PhD. So he spends his life thinking and doing this. Okay, so just be smart before you make comments in the comment section below, and think about, is this something that you really know a lot about? Okay, but anyway, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.